Hello and welcome to the Dad and Buried podcast. As always, my name is Dad and Buried, and joining me tonight is my lovely wife, Mom and Buried, also known as Heather.
Hello.
How's everybody doing tonight? We are approaching the end of January. It's been a long one. It's been dry January for yours truly. Dampuary, I think, for Mom and Buried. Is that what you're calling it?
Dampuary. It has been, for the most part, not drinking during the week, which for the most part is nice, but then sometimes it's not. So
That's my goal when we get into January, is to drink less during the week. But I gotta say, it's been quite boring. Looking forward to the weekend, but what for? Why?
I mean, especially it's cold in New York. You literally can't go anywhere, like at all, because
Because
it's a
there's a
pandemic.
pandemic. There's a pandemic.
Not so much, you can't even go to work. Like there's just literally nothing breaking up your days now that you are dry. So anyway,
Yeah, it's rough. I'm at home 24/7 with the wife and kids, which is lovely, obviously, but without a little bit of the old alcohol to dull my senses, maybe it's a little bit too much of the wife and kids. So tonight we're going to be talking about parenting with chronic illness. As you may or may not know, Mom and Buried here has multiple sclerosis. It is not the only chronic illness. We did hear from some people with a variety of other ones, some of which I'm going to struggle to pronounce. But Mom and Buried actually suggested this topic because you wanted to shed some light on it, which is actually one of the reasons you joined the social media fray, was to kind of be a voice out there for removing some of the stigma from MS and dealing with it with an illness like this, correct?
1,000,000%. Like, as you know, and some of your followers know, for years, literally like 7 years, you were on social media, you were doing your blog, whatever it was, as Dad and Buried, and I was not. Maybe even 8. And then I finally joined as Mom and Buried. And part of that reason was, to give obviously my side of things, my thoughts on things, the female
Your
perspective.
side of things. I'm very fair.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. I'm not saying you're not fair. You're just not often right.
Well, you know what?
But no, you definitely wanted to shed a light on MS, and I will tell a quick story as to why that was important to me. I'd been living with MS for 8 years at that time, I think, and one of my oldest, dearest friends, through no fault of their own, said to me, "So, are you having any symptoms from that yet?" And it was just gut wrenching. Like, yeah, I've had symptoms since the minute I was diagnosed. That's
Even
how I even
before.
found it.
Yeah.
Huh?
If you hadn't had symptoms, you wouldn't have even gotten the diagnosis, right?
But
So,
people sometimes, sometimes people do get diagnoses and they are great for years, or, I don't know, but it was just hard to realize that not just that person, but that a lot of people, because I didn't talk about it because I was trying to be quote unquote regular and keep up with all my friends and what they could do. And as my disease progressed, that was increasingly hard. And I realized that it was such a disservice that, not letting people know what it was like, and certainly wanting other people out there, like some of our listeners who suffer from so many different autoimmune diseases or chronic illnesses, to know that they're not alone, because it can be a very lonely place, I think.
sort of the same thing that we try to do with ADHD and talking about our son's ADHD is helping to remove the stigma and making it okay to talk about this kind of stuff, because a lot of it, people carry this shame and guilt, which isn't really necessary. I guess what I'm trying to say is we're heroes, you and I, together.
Yes.
and tonight's episode, we are going to
Doing the Lord's work.
We're going to focus on some of the challenges, some of the questions you've gotten, some stories from some other people. But before we get into that and we really start focusing on you and your journey, I do want to talk a little bit about how incredible my skin looks. Now, this isn't me saying this. This is people coming at me all over the place on Instagram, just telling me just how incredible my skin looks. And I think it's because I've been drinking water. That's what they seem to think. I have been drinking a lot of water, which I know makes you very jealous, since I'm kind of encroaching on your water game, as you've been a water drinker for years, and now suddenly I'm kind of really kind of taken over pole position on the water drinking in the house.
I probably still drink more water than you, and I don't give a shit. I've been telling you for years to drink water. It's so bizarre to me, people who like make jokes like, oh my God, I'd never think to drink water. As you know, no matter what I'm drinking, I constantly have a water bottle next to me.
You are constantly screaming at me saying, water is my thing. How dare you? And I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to improve myself. That's what Dry January and my New Year's resolutions that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, our parenting resolution, that's what it's all about. Improving myself, improving my family, improving our relationship. I don't know why it makes you so bitter.
You're very bizarre, this like joke you're running with. I mean, knock yourself the fuck out. I mean, why wouldn't I want you to look better?
How could I look better?
24/7.
Can we be honest?
So please, if you could look a little younger and healthier, that'd be fantastic.
I'm doing my best. I had that stomach bug at the beginning of the year, right around New Year's. I lost a few pounds. I haven't had any beer since January 2nd. Really just, I'm a whole new person. I'm a brand new person. And come February 1st, I'm going to go right back to who I used to be, because that's what Dry January is all about.
Putting in the work, like it.
So yeah, obviously, I'm making a couple of jokes because I'm that kind of person. But tonight's a slightly more serious episode than normal. It's not going to be without some moments of levity. Nothing makes Mama Berry laugh more than when I make fun of her chronic disease. So we're going to get back to that in a minute. We're going to get into some of the comments and questions, and we will catch you on the other side. Welcome back to the Dad and Berry podcast. Tonight we're going to be talking about the challenges of parenting with a chronic illness. Mom and Berry has multiple sclerosis, which we're going to be referring to as MS because I have a hard time saying. Do you have a hard time saying it ever? Sclerosis, I find, is tricky.
Sclerosis? Yeah, no, but MS is always what I say, but sometimes that too is just assuming people know what that is, and many people will be like, I've heard of it, or just clueless. Anyway, so yeah, that's what I have.
We also have a friend. We also have a friend who goes by MS, which can sometimes be true. When I'm talking to her husband, and he's like, and I'll say like, "How's MS?" or something like that, and things can get a little bit tricky. Anyway, before we get into this topic, I just want to remind everybody that you can listen to us on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can see us on YouTube if you want. Leave individual comments under those individual episodes. Please subscribe and like, especially where you listen to your podcast. Leave a review or rating if you like. And you can even throw some money at us through Patreon or Anchor. There's a handful of people that do that. We thank them very much. We're not going to run through all their names, kind of getting away from that a little bit since it eats into people want to hear the stuff that I have to say, not necessarily a list of names. Although tonight we're going to be yielding the floor a lot to Mom and Berry, who has the firsthand experience that I think is going to be interesting to a lot of our listeners. A lot of people, when I posed this question, thanked me immediately, and we're just like, "Oh, thank you. This is important. Thank you for sharing." There were a lot of questions and a lot of little anecdotes, and everybody has different situations of their own. And we heard from people who have MS and who have other chronic illnesses or other similar situations in which some of the same challenges come up. So before we kind of get into some of Mama Berry's story, I wanted to read a little bit of some of those. Jess Ann 2783 says that her husband has MS, and she found out right after their 6-year-old was born. And we found out right after our eldest was born, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, he was like 4 months old. We had already been, looking into it, and there's not much you can do with a pregnant woman, like as far as testing wise and everything. Yeah. So we kind of had to wait for that. So yeah, he was 4 months, and I will also never forget that day, the phone call where he was standing. It is, I think, for anyone who's ever been diagnosed with something, a moment that just stands still a bit. But
yeah, that's what you said.
I would say in that moment, there is some relief because so many people go through this long journey of trying to figure out what is wrong with me, and have an answer, even if it's the answer you don't want, there was some relief in it, and at least was like, okay, but now I can make a plan.
So it's funny. So Mrs. underscore WD Wilson asked that question. She said, what was the process of your diagnosis like? She's been on a journey for a year now, and all signs seemingly are pointing toward MS, but they won't diagnose it until they rule everything else out. She is just left in constant pain, unsure what to do. I remember with you, they were reluctant to call it MS for you as well, right? They thought it was some kind of nerve thing. It was like the initial doctor we saw didn't want to cross that bridge.
Oh, yeah. The initial doctor I saw was a piece of shit. And so the number one thing I would tell anyone who's worried they might have a chronic disease or just worried, feeling like they're not getting the medical attention they need, what I've learned the hard way, the long way, is to always advocate for yourself. And the first neurologist I went to, now, yes, I will say one thing. It is a hard process to get diagnosed with MS. Yes, they want to rule out literally everything else. I did all those tests. I did those weird things where they have like heart monitors on your like brain, or I guess not heart monitors, but you know what I mean? Just all these crazy tests.
Speaking of bad doctors.
Just everything that almost seems comical. The amount of blood tests and brain tests and everything. And the one doctor, he basically is like, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. And since my sister had MS, I was at least like, are we sure it's not that? And what he said to me was just like the F this, I'm done with you. He's like, you want me to tell you have MS, but I'm not going to do that. And that I just thought was bullshit. First of all, who wants you to tell them they have a chronic lifelong disease?
Sure, but you did, like you mentioned, you did desperately want answers. You wanted to have something you could treat, that you could name, that you knew what it was, and you could kind of move on from the limbo of uncertainty that you were in.
And I also knew that there was something wrong. And you have to trust your own instincts and your own body. And like things were slowly starting. And I will say that my experience for how my MS started was very gradual and over time. Whereas my sister, who was diagnosed with MS, it was boom. She lost operation of her legs. She fell down. They went to the emergency room and they were like, oh my God, you have MS. So there was like no question. Whereas I'm totally different, same family. And it just, you have to trust your instincts. And so I went and found an awesome doctor who specializes not in just neurology, but actual multiple sclerosis. But still, it was a process where it was being diagnosed as a neuropathy for a while I was pregnant.
We should say that you have, because some people ask, you have relapsing remitting, not progressive, right?
I have.
And the other thing I really quickly I wanted to say about doctors is, your doctor, the odds are he's going to be a big part of your life for a while, right? So like you and I, our doctor, we know him, you see him a fair amount, right? So if you don't like the doctor,
we've grown old together.
Yeah, see if you can find one, because when you have a chronic illness.
I was some young thing when I walked in there. But I will say too, like in my case, the last thing about that is obviously advocate for yourself. Usually it's an MRI. They couldn't even see it on my MRI, and turns out that's because most of my stuff at that point they discovered early, which is awesome, and my spine is more affected than my brain, at least initially, and so it took a spinal tap, which the other doctor wasn't even willing to do. So ask all the questions, find out all you can, and just make sure you're with someone you trust is going to help give you the answers. And I will say that my doctor, even when he drives me crazy, because he's really in high demand and he's just kind of like, I don't know, doctors can be doctors. He's been hanging out with me for like 12 years.
Yeah, well, that's also the challenge, right? Because these guys see so many people of varying severity, right? And when they see you, to you, it's the worst thing that's ever happened. To him, it may be like you might be on the lower scale.
The best case he's seen all day, right?
Yeah.
And so, hard to keep in mind, but just everyone advocate for themselves, no matter what they think is going on. Get answers and find people who will help you do it.
So we heard from a bunch of people that have MS. There was someone whose husband has epilepsy. Other people with chronic illnesses. Somebody has something called Sjogren's syndrome, which is an autoimmune disease, SJOGREN.
Yep.
She had to have her thyroid removed because of cancer. But what's interesting is so many of these diseases have, if not exactly the same symptoms, some of the same repercussions, right? Where the person has an unbelievable amount of exhaustion and fatigue, isn't able to do as much for as long as someone who doesn't have the chronic illness might have. And the exhaustion obviously is something that's a big part of your life. We often talk, one of the reasons I largely took over mornings is because it takes you a little bit longer to kind of wake up. It's a little bit different now since our kids don't have to be up. I don't have to bring them to the school bus, but you getting extra sleep is a big deal. And 8 hours for you isn't quite the same as 8 hours for somebody else, right? Like you need more than that, which isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do when you have two kids, especially young ones.
Well, yeah, and I mean, as you also know, the beautiful, you can fatigue and being tired, exhaustion and tired isn't necessarily the same, right? Right? You get the fatigue a lot of times where you're tired, but I personally have a hard time sleeping. So 8 hours is, that's the dream in the first place. A lot of people who have chronic illness, there are things literally keeping them up at night. Sometimes I'll have spasms and stuff, really hard to go to sleep, not to mention some of the anxiety and depression that often comes part and parcel with having a chronic illness that you are forced to live with day in and day out, which we can talk about a little bit too. But sleep is key. And I think a lot of us, from what I see, some of the notes so far is, the fatigue, even when it's not, oh, I want a nap, it's, oh, I have to let my body rest. And so many people dealing with the guilt of feeling that way. That really struck me as I was looking over some of these people's stories, just how many people feel exactly the way I feel.
Right. Well, we wanted to talk about
half the week.
We want to talk about the impact of having MS or having a chronic illness has on a family or has on a parent. And a lot of that guilt is in relation to your relationship with your kids and sometimes being too tired to interact with them the ways that you might want. A lot of people asked how we kind of explained your diagnosis to our kids, which we have to our now 10-year-old, but not so much aside from incidentally, I don't think yet to the hammer, but we'll get around to it. But like somebody like Cuckoo Jacobs mentioned that her kids help care for her now when she's not feeling well. And so there's the negative, the guilt aspect, which you have of not necessarily being the mom that you always want to be because of their problems with your illness. But at the same time, kids are adapting in ways that maybe we don't even realize, and growing up with a little bit more empathy or compassion and being slightly bit of caretakers. Not that you want your kids to be your caretaker, and at least not until you're in diapers when you're 80. But it can be a nice side effect.
One, how old is their kids? Like, is 10 too early? Because I could use like breakfast in bed sometimes, and I think that would really help my MS kids, But I remember first mentioning it to maybe Munch when he was like 6-ish. But I used to do injections at home where Dad and Barry actually would have to give me shots every day. So like there had to be some sort of explanation, right? But over time, I wrote an article, as I think for like today, parents are today, and about how there is that unforeseen maybe passion that does come along. And I think we're seeing that more and more with Munch, but also you see moments where like, it's really hard. As it's taken me years to even kind of accept the idea of like a lazy Sunday. Mm-hmm. I'm the person who has always wanted to get up and go. Ever since Dad and Barry met me, that's who I am. It's like, oh, we're doing something today, that's it, or we're going skiing, we got to get the 8 a.m. run. Like, I want to fit all of life I possibly can.
And for me, that's actually one of the bonuses of her MS is that when she's too tired to do something on Sunday, I get that rare lazy Sunday that I'm always desperate for, especially during football season.
I would say the last year or two, finally, I have given up on making Sunday a thing. And let my body rest. And sometimes though that rolls over into Monday, and then there's
Yeah.
that guilt, right? And it's always hard. I mean, my kids, as they get older, I will say sometimes they're like, hell yeah, lazy Monday, because
Well,
they're getting screens. Let's be honest. They
it's
know they're going
funny.
to get extra screens that day.
Somebody mentioned that. So Oliwatosin.Sequoia said she's a single mom with lupus. She's constantly tired and her kids take advantage. Hopefully she doesn't mean that and like her kids are like out, breaking laws and stuff. But our
Hopefully.
kids definitely know when we're being lazy, regardless of the reason, they get screens. They'll be on those screens until they hear a peep from us, which sometimes, we're happy to let them go. And I'm always trying to tell you to take it easy and cut yourself some slack. Not only does everyone deserve a lazy day once in a while, but obviously somebody with a chronic illness like yours, it's not your fault, right? You're entitled to it, and you gotta not compounding your stress and your anxiety and your guilt with guilt over what you can and can't do is just a recipe for disaster. And I'm constantly trying to talk you out of that.
I
It's not
would
easy.
say like lately I've probably been a little worse at it, but I had gotten to a point where I was pretty good. I think the pandemic and just the laziness that comes part and parcel with it. I mean, it's just everyone's in a shit show right now. And as you remind me all the time, it's like we're just trying to survive. Like, Jesus Christ, it's hard. But I will say that I do think Munch he gets it more. And sometimes that's a little sad. But for the most part, I think it's going to make him just a better human. And I think that that's great. And I hope no one is feeling guilty if they didn't get their kids to, I don't know, some fucking playground today or some other bullshit. They'll be fine, because I will say we have had a million movie nights and they're kind of our fates.
Mm-hmm.
Our kids will grow up and remember that. And you can be resting then.
You know me, I'm a sucker for a movie night, a lazy Sunday and a movie night.
Yeah, you're just watching football or some movie from 1989 about, I don't know.
That's not even an old movie. I mean, 1989 is not
First
old.
of all, that's a long time ago.
You could have said like 59. I mean, I like classic movies. I do not consider 89 classics. What am I watching?
Stare at your phone for 6 hours and be like, hey, people on Dad and Dairy, ask me some questions.
Oh, wow. Shots fired. This is really
Not to say I never did that, but fair enough.
You were coming for me. So VM Rizzi mentions the guilt thing. She says she hates having to admit to her kid that she's just too tired or she's in too much pain to do something. SCS Fun Times mentioned something. She has hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia disorder.
Yeah, we're going to kill that one. HHT for short.
Yeah, a chronic vascular disorder that it's a lot of fatigue, and it's going to involve complications when she's older. And she said that her kids are used to her being tired and out of breath. And she thinks that the fact that it's normal for them to have a mom who's like that makes her sad. But all you can do is try to make the best out of the situation, which she does. And then she has the guilt of worrying that she may have passed the disease on to them. And I know that every once in a while you have thoughts like that where you're worried that maybe one of our kids might have MS. And
absolutely.
I know, but that again, that's not your fault either.
Me. Like, I think about it. I don't know. Like, Munch in many ways, I realize, is made very much like me. Just even little ailments he'll get, or just little things. So same allergies, crap like that, right? That make me worry about that. I have also sighed a breath of relief that men are slightly less likely to get MS than women, although, there's a couple men even just in the comments.
In these comments, yeah.
And I've heard that too, of people being like, my husband has MS. So, and unfortunately, I think MS and many autoimmune diseases are growing. And there's some interesting studies out there for why they started, but there's no real idea. And there's certainly no cure.
I was just going to bring that up, that they don't really know what causes it.
I mean, this is like, put this in the file of like shit some crazy person said about an alien sighting or whatever. But the most interesting thing that's resonated with me that I've read is they do think it's possible it could be linked to a strain of chickenpox you had as a child, right? which seems random. But there also has to be other factors, and environmental factors are definitely like colder weather climates, 1,000,000%. Like it doesn't even exist in some warm cultures, right?
Right.
So, but me, my sister, and my best friend at the time all got the exact same strain of chickenpox, like as a
Like
child.
it sounds like an environmental factor potentially,
And
right? Yeah.
that friend too, she got MS. Like we're not friends anymore. We
Right.
rediscovered each other on Facebook. It's like rural Pennsylvania we're talking about, right? But just for like 3 out of the 5 people who were interacting at that time, that just seems insane. And I'm still scarred by that chickenpox.
Yeah.
Unrelated.
So that's one of the
But
challenges, though, is without them knowing what causes it, that makes you nervous about how potentially handing it down to your kids. It's harder. It's hard to diagnose, as we mentioned. And kind of one of the big things, and one of the things that you mentioned earlier in terms of like your friends not always knowing, how it's going or if you're feeling it, is that it's one of those invisible illnesses where you can seem externally like you're fine, you're not in a wheelchair, although some people obviously from MS and other chronic illnesses can end up that way, but you're not like that. So it's not readily apparent to everybody, and the challenge of not only dealing with this stuff but then having to explain to somebody that you have it or what you're going through, that can't be a lot of fun either. And like
now,
even especially when it's your own kids sometimes.
well, yeah. I mean, it's always hard. It's not always hard to tell your kids no. That's not
Well, when they're young and
it.
they don't necessarily understand, right? So like as they gotten older, it's
Right.
gotten a little
And
easier.
especially like the hammer, he doesn't know anything right now. Like we don't
Right.
talk about it with him
He's
really.
quite dumb.
But I'm gonna actually mention milk-free mama here, who talks about having a chronic illness and that in her case, her husband is bipolar. And she said, so sometimes that also means the empathy piece is missing a little bit. And I feel like I have to constantly say I'm feeling unwell. She's like, she takes on more than she can handle, even though he knows I'm unwell. And it's not always visible and therefore doesn't really exist. AKA, I look fine on the outside. So I deal with that. And what are the invisible illnesses? And I feel like we need to strike that from our conversation, our dialogue, vocabulary, sorry. Like, that's what MS and a lot are considered, because you could be in so much pain inside and you don't see it.
Like your nerve endings and stuff, which is not even an easy thing to convey or explain to people, regardless of show them.
What am I going to do? Be like, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well. Let me tell you what's happening in my body right now. Like, so my nerves are, my nervous system is attacking the myelin, or autoimmune system is attacking the myelin on my nervous system. And that's causing, right?
So boring.
If you don't, I know that too. But like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what this person, so milk free mama, I feel for you, and especially hard when you're dealing with it with the husband, who at least Dad and Barry, I don't know, like I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and then I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. But like, so at any given time, me with MS, my bottom can be spasming, my extremities can be numb, my brain could be completely fogged and like unable to find words, like even just, hey, full disclosure for something like me doing a podcast. I will lose a word in there and be trying to find it so bad. And it's so frustrating, especially for someone who like loves writing, loves words, loves vocabulary. Something like that'll happening. The spasms get me the worst. There can be people having a hard time just standing, and numbness. And, right now I'm actually having a relapse that sucks really fucking hard. And it's causing my eyes going blurry and getting dry and like
new
causing
symptoms
issues.
that you just never, and
No,
new
and this
symptoms you
has
never
not
anticipated.
ever happened to me at all. Like I said earlier, a lot of my stuff is more my extremities and my lower body because it's spinal related. And so for my eyes to be attacked all of a sudden, but these are things that someone who looks fine can be going through at any given minute. And I think that hopefully we can like I said, strike that word from our vocabulary and just understand that like you don't have to see it for someone to be in pain, because there's so many things and that's just what my autoimmune disease does. Autoimmune diseases, if there's anyone listening who doesn't understand what they are, means your immune system is drunk, and it thinks that there's a foreign invader in your body, and it's just attacking whatever it's attacking. It could be your liver, autoimmune like hepatitis. My sister had that. It could be your nervous system, like me. It could be a billion different things. And I know we saw that in some of our comments. And it damages them, and it will continue to damage them all through your life. For MS, right. What I can do is I can take drugs and medications that will hopefully slow down how much damage my body does to me.
Long term, yeah, as it goes.
Long term. But it doesn't stop it, and you can't go back. I can't get back what I had 10 years ago. Symptoms have gotten worse, and that's what happens. And some people fare better than others. And like, so I always have so much love for the autoimmune warriors out there, and anyone dealing with chronic illness, because chronic is a long fucking time to be dealing with all this.
So a handful of people did have like curiosity, or either it would be people who have spouses with a chronic illness, or people themselves who are wondering maybe what their own spouses think, right? So a handful of people asked me as a spouse. But before I get into that, I did want to ask JC Painter, JACI Painter said, how do you, Mama Berry, handle the guilt when you can't pull your weight? Whether that's, doing stuff around the house or with the kids. But from my perspective, you still kind of do a remarkable job of getting everything done. And this is one of the reasons I'm like, you don't need to feel so guilty when you need a lazy day or when you're not feeling your best or your symptoms are acting up, because you still do an absolute shit ton of stuff. And especially with the pandemic, there's not a lot of other stuff to do, right? So you're entitled, or you can either be doing some stuff or laying down doing nothing, because we can't go anywhere or do anything. I think you're way too hard on yourself. You get a shitload done, despite, the challenges that you have with old symptoms, new symptoms, or whatever. But do you feel like sometimes that like you're not pulling your weight, aside from putting things in the dishwasher, which you fucking refuse to do? You just put it in the sink. It's right there.
Yeah. This is the journey of the dishes in our house. Our kids leave them where they may. They land where they may.
True.
We come along hours later, infuriated, and pick them up. Dad and Barry often gets angry because he'll find like a cup he knew had milk in it there, and I'll be like, "That milk's gotta go bad. Oh my God, this is the worst thing that's ever gonna happen to me."
3 times a day. Yeah.
And then he'll put it on the counter directly next to the sink.
No, I'll put it in the fridge without refilling it. Don't get it twisted.
Oh, right. The milk cups will just put empty cups in the fridge. Literally, does anyone else do this? But besides that, all the other dishes he will put next to the sink which is
lies.
Dishwasher. We have a small New York kitchen. There's literally 3 feet of space. And
no one
where
fills
the dishwasher goes.
The dishwasher more than me.
Over it.
No one fills it better than me. No one fills it more than me.
Well,
I'm amazing at filling it.
Why don't you just do it instead of step 1, put it on the counter? Step 1 could be rinse it and put it in the dishwasher.
This is what I'm saying you don't do. You leave everything in the sink. Whatever.
No. This is where the journey continues. It goes from the counter into the sink, because I need the counter space to, cook for you people, because it's a small counter space, keep in mind, people. And then I'll put it in the sink and be like, fine, you deal with that shit later. But if you dealt with that shit first, it would never end up in the sink.
So Hobo Alley asks, who do you vent to when you're frustrated because of the extra burden you carry? When it comes to the extra burden of having to deal with the dishes, I usually would vent on Instagram. I think I'll do a story.
Oh, you mean this question for you, right? Right.
Yes, this question was for me. This is about my burden. We're moving on to the me portion of the broadcast.
We didn't even get to the answer for the last question for me.
Give me your answer then. Fine. You have a few more minutes.
What was the question?
How do you handle the guilt when you can't pull your weight?
Not well.
I can vouch. Not well.
It drives me crazy, and I internalize it. And I think, first of all, let's strike not pull your weight. What the hell does that mean? I think we should all try to do our best, and sometimes I give myself a lot of grace that I'm doing great, and sometimes I'm an asshole to myself.
Yeah, and
Gary
usually
is good at reminding me the
to
days
not be an asshole.
Huh?
If anyone's gonna be an asshole to you, it's gonna be me and the kids.
The
You
kids.
do internalize that stuff until like 12:30, right when I'm about to fall asleep, when you like to let it fly.
And then we can talk about it. Then let's have a heart to heart. But on to you, because MJ, I will say, I liked that some people asked questions about what it is to be, the significant other of someone who has a chronic illness, because that is hard. I can only imagine that must be hard as shit. And so when people ask about guilt, I'll feel guilt as in, okay, well, MJ worked a lot today, and now he's like doing the dishes, or he handles laundry, which is partially because of my MS. It's not a thing that's easy for me to do.
Partially because I love it. I love laundry.
And he also loves it.
And
I'll be like, he's worked all day. Now he's doing this stuff and this stuff. And oh my God, I haven't accomplished shit. And yes, maybe I've ordered groceries online, or did something that I've been laying in bed for, or helped the hammer through his preschool stuff, or like art stuff. I don't count it. I don't count the successes, know. And I will feel guilty, though, that it puts more on you. So how do you feel?
Most of the time I'm fine. Every once in a while it gets, I try to make sure that when I do get frustrated at stuff, it's about the normal marriage stuff, and not about like, I'm not going to get mad at the fact that you have MS and be like, this is bullshit. I'm very aware of that, and I try to do my best to accommodate that. Sure. I mean, sometimes the same way that you get frustrated at the fact that you have MS, and you can't do the things you want to do, I probably do sometimes too. But the Hobo Alley asked who I vent to when I'm frustrated. Nobody. Every once in a while I'll talk to a friend or two, but nobody wants to hear that. And I think I do okay. I've written before, I don't really have anxiety. I don't get too in the weeds in my own head about stuff like that. So it's not too much of a burden on me mentally, I think, that I need to like vent. I just do my normal bullshit on Instagram, and I'll vent about something else, and it just makes me feel better. Just the action of venting and ranting.
Well, here's the question though. Are you ever like, because there's a fine line, right? But like, wow, I have extra to do today, and I'm tired of doing shit. And wow, my wife's been laying on her ass all day. And you're just like, is MS bothering her, or is she just being a lazy piece of shit?
Sure, sometimes. I mean, you can't help but think that stuff, but I know you're not a lazy person. Sometimes you can't help but be like, oh, she's fine. You fall prey to the same shit that like, you're like, oh, because I can usually tell, or you'll tell me when things are particularly bad or whatever. And sometimes it does get frustrating if we're like in the room and you're laying there and I'm in the middle of something and, you're on your phone. But again, like most of the stuff I just chalk up to, the same kind of stuff anybody without a chronic illness would do, or sometimes you're just being a lazy piece of shit once in a while. Everybody's entitled to that. But R. Ingraham asked some tough questions. She said, do you ever wish this wasn't your life? Do you regret getting married? Do you ever get exhausted of this life and want to pull away because of but you can't, because how do you leave a wife who's sick? And she says that she carries this immense pressure to always be on and put the makeup on and put the earrings on and look good for her husband, because she wants to make sure he won't leave her, because she needs to like up her game because she's also chronically ill. And I just think that's lousy. It's an awful situation to be in. I think you need to talk to your husband and try to get some reassurance. You don't necessarily want somebody to be with you because, they feel guilty. And hopefully that's not the case. That's certainly not the case with Mama Buried and I. I don't give a shit if you have MS. You piss me off, I'm out. You deal with that.
Dude, I couldn't even handle the every other weekend situation alone, so I'm fine. I'm solid.
Please.
But for this person, I mean, obviously, who knows? I do not feel the need to put on makeup and earrings.
Tell me about it.
I mean, this many years in, I do not. Although, like, oh my God, after this pandemic, like, I put on some makeup today. I was like, Jesus, I want to go places and look nice. I want to do those things. I just want to have an excuse to. And as you know, over the holidays, I was like, that's it. I'm getting dressed up. And Dad Barry's like, I'm going to be in this same hoodie I've been in for 9 months.
I look good in the hoodie and in my beanie. Everybody knows my skin is fucking glowing.
So obviously, I'm not getting that pressure. Anyone who is, I think they feel that it could be completely in your head the same way a million things are in my head. And so maybe it is a conversation with your significant other.
Yeah.
And also, huge fan of therapy and therapist, if that's what anyone who's going through chronic illness needs. I mean, I used to go to one regularly because, like I said at the beginning of this, depression, anxiety, I have both. Like I am, like, I don't know what's certified. It's not like I'm just saying this, right? Like what's the word? Diagnosed anxiety disorder. They do go hand in hand. And how the hell would they not, when on top of the real world right now that we all know is just a fucking burning dumpster fire, you're dealing with your chronic illness. And also, like I said at one point in this podcast, I'm in the middle of one of my worst relapses I've ever had. And it's not been getting better. And it's happening during all of this shit. Like, it started in like November, right after the election, like through the holidays, through an insurrection, like, all these little tiny things.
And it may or may not be related to COVID or the long haul COVID from when you had that.
Oh, yeah. And also, because I'm soups lucky, I got COVID like the minute getting COVID was cool.
Well, you catch everything, right? So like I've mentioned that before in various contexts. You because your weakened immune system and some of the drugs you're on to, help stave off some of your MS symptoms can lower your immune system. So you catch every cold the kids bring home, and you caught COVID before even people were even talking about it. Like you had it.
Yeah, before school was even canceled by like
You're a pioneer.
Probably from volunteering at school, for all we know. Or I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, because I do have pretty strong immunosuppressants. I go get an injection of twice a year. And it's literally meant to like kill off your immune system, basically, so your immune system doesn't get all like rogue on your body. And a lot of people with autoimmune disorders have to go through the same thing. So they also have the anxiety. If they didn't catch COVID, fingers crossed that most people have stayed healthy, that they could very easily, much more so than other people, and especially over the course of a year when there's been, ebbs and flows of people just not giving a shit in parts of the country. So many people I've heard from being like feeling just completely, everyone is like locked up because of this pandemic, but there's a fair amount of people who are not doing that, in all honesty.
Yeah.
And there's, what I mean? There's all of us who are like, oh my God, I can't believe I've been like quarantining for 10 months. And there are some people that are just like, what quarantine?
Yeah.
And you know what? Fuck those people.
Don't tread on me. Fuck you, man.
I mean, because the amount of sick people and older people that, just could get sick from going out to get a gallon of milk, it's just messed up. And so, there's a lot of stress that goes on. And so, of course, and then also stress causes most autoimmune
symptoms to
diseases,
flare. Yeah.
And I imagine chronic illnesses to act up, and it's just like avoid stress. Will be like one of the top 5 things.
That's where I come in and I say stop being stressed, and then you're just like, thank you, because I'm just good at it.
That's how it works. Or when you're like, oh my God, I'm so anxious. Well, don't be anxious. Cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Thumbs up.
So a couple things before we go. So a handful of people, we touched on this a little bit, but was asked about. Ben-T80 asked if our kids know about the MS, how do we explain it to them? Felshem, our neighbor here in Brooklyn, said, how did you start telling the kids? How do they react and stuff? I think, from my perspective, you be as open, as honest as you can. You don't want to scare them, depending on how young they are. And, I don't know how you feel about it, but, Detective Munch takes it pretty well, and he understands things, and they need to know, especially as they get older, that there are some limitations that, mommy has, and these are the reasons for them. And the more knowledge they have, I think, the better equipped they are to understand it and to deal with it.
And I think for us, the way we've approached it is little by little. And I don't even know, MJ, that you even know some of the conversations that happen
I
with
probably don't.
happen organically when he and I are together and alone. And then it's just, now that he's 10, I think I've opened up a lot more, And so when he was like 5, I remember mentioning it and then slowly explaining, becoming more comfortable when he was like 6, 7, especially to be like, I can't, and here's why. Instead of like putting that pressure on myself to just do it anyway, do it anyway. It was after the hammer was born. And I did get worse. My symptoms got worse after the hammer. It definitely has gotten harder after 2 kids than when I had symptoms for 1. And then I had to start being more honest. But like even just like last week, Munch was asking a little bit about it, and like I was trying to explain it, and it was somehow related to COVID, how it came up. I don't remember exactly, but it actually ended in me being like, okay, well, here, do you know what this nervous system looks like? And bringing up a computer image of the nervous system and just literally explaining and being like, so if my arm is hurting, you see how that like nerve goes there, like, because he's, much more learning about this stuff now, going into detail. So I would say we've been pretty frank and honest overall. And I think he's a very empathetic kid. He's got the biggest heart, and it made him sad. But I also think he would rather know.
Yeah, and understand it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it was good for him to kind of actually have a visualization and like get it a little bit more. So I think sometimes it's hard to know, and he is so sweet sometimes when he knows I don't feel well. Oh my God, this kid. Or he hears me crying because life is hard and it's.
I can't wait until I can rope him in and he can do more of like this stuff and help you, so I can just head off and go to the casino or whatever. A couple of years maybe. We say
the casino.
So you mentioned one thing that I wanted to close with, right? I want to close with this question from Fuller of KT, who said she just found my account because she has MS and someone sent me the account because she's starting to talk about having kids. Now I don't know if they sent it when I posted this topic, or they just knew she was thinking about having kids, so they just sent her the best parenting account in the world, and she went on to it, and it's just a coincidence. But she wants to know, is it actually doable? Now, you and we have a 5-year gap between our 2 kids, and one of the reasons we had that gap is there was a little bit of uncertainty of if you wanted to have another kid in terms of, how it would impact your body. And not only that, but how old you will be when the kid is old enough, and how the MS might have progressed, by the time he's a teenager or whatever. And it was one of, many, many, many factors. And I don't want to speak for you, but it was definitely something we considered. You weren't diagnosed until after we had our first son.
However, yes. Well, first of all, Fuller of Katie, your question struck me from the minute I saw all of it. And I'm not branding on it because I've been there and I understand it. But yes, I was diagnosed afterwards. However,
after the first kid.
After, yes, our first kid. However, I know this timeline so well in my head because it was 2009. It was a big year for me, good and bad. But I remember the first symptoms coming up when we were in Italy. We were on vacation, pre-kids. And I remember exactly how it kind of started with this numbness in my toe and these feelings that just didn't feel right. And that was like in spring of 2009. And I was starting to go to that doctor who was being a big piece of shit to me. Like that we mentioned
DM me for his name so you guys can avoid him.
That summer. But we were still planning to have kids that year. Like we were trying. We knew like fall of that year.
So much.
Like we were just going to do it anyway. And so I had started to suspect it, and I knew something was wrong, but it didn't stop me at that point. That being said, I was not diagnosed. I did not fully understand MS. Mm-hmm. Even though my sister had it, I didn't know. The second kid was a lot harder to decide on. And, you know, it depends, I think, how you feel. Like a lot of my doctor definitely, and what you read online is like, there's no reason you can't get pregnant. Obviously, you can. The really cool thing is that most women during pregnancy go into a remission of some kind, or their body is so busy nurturing and stuff. The bad news is sometimes, and certainly in my case, on the second kid specifically, after being done breastfeeding or after being done pregnant, if you're not breastfeeding, when like your regular stuff, you know, period, all that junk returns, it can cause a relapse, and it did. And that sucked a lot. And I will say, with my first kid, it was so easy. Looking back comparatively, like my symptoms were so much easier then. My second kid was a harder pregnancy, and my MS has advanced incrementally since. I'm still, obviously, you know, I'm walking, and there's great things, but like it definitely affected me. Not just that, but probably also all the added stress and work and everything of having two kids.
So one thing we didn't totally touch on, which I want to mention really quickly, is that when you do have a flare or a relapse, a lot of times that resets your baseline, right? Your symptoms bounce up a little bit, and all of a sudden that's your new kind of normal. And you might have new symptoms that arise from that. It just, like you said, incrementally it changes, and there was a big difference in your body and everything, and how the MS had progressed from when we had the first kid to the second. So I would say, and I'm not going to speak for you, but I mean, I don't think that you're going to say it's not doable. You would say it's doable, but it depends on her circumstances, where she's at in her life and with her MS. But, you know, probably the sooner the better, in terms of if you're worried the MS is going to progress, the younger you are, the sooner the better, because it is a chronic illness that keeps going. Within reason, yeah.
16 and pregnant here.
Yeah, I don't know how old she is. So.
No, I mean, within reason, or just when you feel ready. I mean, the thing is like, even looking back, I knew I wouldn't get through this episode without at least crying a little.
Looking back, what, to before the first, or in
I think just at all of it. Like, there's no way I wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I always say. Even though I despise my children, I don't want to not have them, right? I would never go back and get rid of my kids, no matter how annoying they are, and they are unbelievably annoying.
Wow, I knew I wouldn't get through this without crying. Like I said, I'm going.
Well, you made it to the end.
Emotions are high, and you did it to me, Fuller Katie. But no, I mean, there's no way I would personally change it, because they have been my biggest joy. And even if it means some days I can't get out of bed on Sunday quite as much as I used to, I have them to snuggle and hold, and they're in my life.
Which is why lately you keep wanting to have another, because the 5-year-old is not necessarily snuggling as much as he used to, and I have said absolutely not. We will not be having.
I'm not gonna lie. That would be the one thing that right now I don't struggle with, but like I've thought about more, because as Dad Barry knows, I've always wanted 2 kids. I probably would. I think I'm starting to realize I probably would have been like, no, I think I want one more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're going to get a dog.
And Dad and Barry has been adamantly no. But I think probably if things were different, I would have had one more. And,
like things were
I
different.
will say unequivocally, besides Dad and Barry standing in the way, MS is the thing that has stopped me from being able to do that. And that's kind of sucky.
That and me. The
That
two biggest
is, but
roadblocks
you
for
know
your
what?
happiness are MS and
I've
dad
got my
and
ways. I could have worked around that. Plus, as you said, you always love the kid once they're here. So just, slip that in there and you'd be like, oops, I love this one too.
Let's not test that theory. We'll get a dog.
No.
Okay?
We're past that point. But I think that I've heard from people, actually, even someone else being like, we accidentally had a third, like on my own, the Mom and Barry page, and saying like, we weren't ready for it because it is a lot.
Or you accidentally have 3 and it's twins.
Oh, please. You just gotta
More
make
to love.
serious money to start supporting that. But there's nothing I would change. I mean, I would change not having MS. That'd be cool. Yeah. But since I have no power over that one, I'm so glad that I have the people in my family, the kids, who are great snugglers, Munch, who is being more and more compassionate every day, Hammer, who makes me laugh my ass off. He's completely clueless about it and doesn't give a shit. And Dad and Barry for always supporting me and being the one to say, like, okay, get out of your own head. You're fine.
Yes.
You're doing. You said
depression is made up. I said.
Huh?
Depression is made up. There's no COVID. What are you talking about? That's the kind of stuff I tell them. It's all a hoax.
Actually, the other day you said something very nice. I don't know if you remember. It was something to the effect of, I don't know, a lot of people going through even like a little bit of what you're going through right now wouldn't even be standing. Because I was guilting myself.
Yes, as you do.
And I am having a hard time with this relapse for other chronic illness sufferers out there who know what it's like when you get a flare or a relapse. And this Dad and Barry tried to express that means like shit was like baseline of not great, and now it's just bad, or at least worse than usual. It's hard to deal with. So I feel for all you guys as you go through this, especially in such a stressful year. I'm sending so much healing thoughts and always welcome to talk. I do have Mom and Barry Instagram.
And DM her.
Huh?
You can DM. I'm saying you can DM Mom and Barry. She loves this touchy-feely stuff.
And, just know that you're not alone. And kudos to those moms who are holding up and dads. Sorry, all parents.
Thank you. Dads. Jesus, finally.
Who are holding up every day. Autoimmune warriors, chronic illness warriors. I know these are silly hashtags that go around, but it's fucking true. It is hard. We all make jokes, and I love making all the jokes about the regular things that are hard about having kids. That your kids won't eat your dinner, or the kids won't go to bed, or the kids leave their shit everywhere, or the kids, whatever. We're dealing with that it's really probably the least hard part of our day. Sometimes it's like the most, but like there's this whole other layer of like pain and fatigue and worry and anxiety, and holy shit, that's pretty impressive that you put up with kid shit and you carry all of that with you every day.
And I have to put up with you. And so I am a warrior, a Mom and Barry warrior. Really making it through. I'm gonna start that hashtag.
Yeah, start that hashtag, Mom and Barry warrior.
So I do want to say that that's ultimately the reason we're doing this, is to let everyone know they're not alone, and that there's a lot of people who go through this, and that it's hard for everybody to varying degrees, but it is possible to get through. And there's a lot of solidarity out there. And your Mom and Barry impresses me on a daily basis with what she's able to withstand. She mentioned the spinal tap earlier. If I had gotten the spinal tap, I would be still crying years later. So
I know. You freak out like when you have to have like the slightest needle or something.
Okay.
They will take literally.
This isn't about me. Okay, this is about you today. So,
I think they've taken like 50% of my blood in my lifetime. And
so big shouts to everybody, to Fuller of KT. I'm sure if you wanted to reach out to Mama Berry, she would be more than happy to discuss with you.
I mean, honestly, every person on here
Yes.
sent messages. I know we couldn't get to all of them. There's so many different chronic illnesses.
Thank you for sharing your stories and your challenges. And obviously, honey, thank you for opening up and coming on my podcast. We're trying to get the clicks. This is the provocative kind of material we need. Please go subscribe. Please go subscribe and listen.
How dare you?
Via Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen. You can throw us a little bit of money. Don't go to that doctor we mentioned. DM me. I'll tell you the shitty doctor's name. I don't even remember his name.
I don't even remember. He's struck from my memory.
But we are out there for you to to say the stuff that maybe you're a little bit nervous to say, whether it's about hating your kids like I do, or dealing with the challenges of a chronic illness with grace and I don't know.
Equally respectable goals in life.
Yes. Please reach out to us and to Mom and Buried and subscribe and listen and
tell your friends.
Thank you for checking this out. Tell your friends, yeah, and tell your kids. Do kids listen to this? Don't tell your kids. We swear a lot.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
To my story, and more importantly, sharing all of your stories. They make me feel less alone.
Well, we'll see you next week when dry January is over, baby. All right. Bye-bye. I don't know why you would still be watching this isn't a Marvel movie, no matter how much I look like Paul Rudd, which you can deny it all you want. It's there in the eyes, I think. I'm young looking like him. If you enjoyed the podcast, which you obviously did or you wouldn't be listening still, sign up on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you want to listen to. Comment here on YouTube, subscribe, hit that like button. We want to hear from you. Comments, questions, dirty jokes, money, all the money you can give us. We'd love it all. Catch you next time.